yearn for the coming of their Messiah, the Mahdi, who, according to their belief, will come to rule for 7 years on this earth before the final judgment. That longing lives in every word spoken in prayer, in every heart that bows towards Mecca, in every corner where Islam breathes and flourishes. For the Ummah, it is not a distant tradition or a philosophical concept. It is the deepest and most ardent hope, the future promise that sustains the soul of every Muslim in times of global turmoil. Considering this, we must ask ourselves, does the Bible reveal anything about the Mahdi's identity? Could he be the Antichrist who, like the Mahdi in Islamic belief, will also rule this earth for 7 years before the second coming of Jesus, according to biblical prophecies? Dear listener, in this video, we will be answering these questions and exploring everything related to the arrival of the Muslim Messiah and his possible connection with biblical prophecies. I invite you to watch this video until the end, because what you are about to discover will make you see clearly that we are living in the end times. Before continuing, I want to share some good news. We have created a prayer channel, and you can find us on YouTube as Altar of Prayer. Every morning we come together to seek God's presence and start the day strengthened in His love. If you're going through difficult times, if you're facing worries or challenges in your life, I invite you to join us. It will be a great blessing for your heart, because there's nothing better than starting the day in communion with the Lord. Let's get started. Muslims yearn for the coming of their Messiah. That name resonates in the heart of every believer, in every mosque, at every dawn when the call to prayer breaks the silence of the desert and awakens entire cities. It is the name of the Mahdi, the guided one, the chosen one to restore justice, correct all disorder, and establish the final truth on earth. For the Islamic faith, his arrival is not a philosophical thought, a religious desire, or a romantic notion. It is destiny, a certainty as strong as the rising of the sun each morning, an event sealed by the will of Allah according to their belief, awaited in the whispers of the devout soul and on the lips that utter prayers day and night. In every prayer, in every reading of the Quran, in every breath that looks upon the state of the world and feels its chaos, the Muslim heart silently repeats, "The Mahdi will come. He will come to establish justice where oppression reigns. He will come to purify the land where sin has multiplied. He will come to unite the Ummah under one holy and righteous leadership, as they believe it was in the early days of Islam." Dear listener, this is no minor figure. For millions, he is the final chapter of human history, the restorer of divine order, the leader who will raise the name of Allah above all nations and subdue the proud with heavenly righteousness. As the classical scholar Imam al-Qurtubi expressed it, the appearance of the Mahdi is an established truth, and he will be of the family of the messenger. He will fill the earth with justice after it has been filled with injustice. This hope does not die. It dwells in the spiritual blood of Islam, and every generation, from the 7th century to the present day, has looked upon the world with the same burning expectation. When all seems lost, he will appear. Now, to understand who the Mahdi is, we wish to go back to the very beginning of this belief within Islam. We cannot understand his prophetic figure without observing how the expectation surrounding him was born, how it evolved, and why to this day, millions of Muslims place their hope in him as the ultimate leader of humanity. When the Prophet Muhammad died in 632 after Christ, the Islamic world faced its first great spiritual and historical challenge. Until that time, the Muslim community had been guided by a living prophetic voice. Muhammad spoke, instructed, corrected, and led with divine authority. His death raised a monumental question: who would guide the believers now that there was no longer a living prophet? Islam believed, and still believes today, that Muhammad is the seal of the prophets. This means there would be no new revelation, nor any other prophet to come after him. With this, direct spiritual leadership ended. However, the spiritual mission of Islam could not stop. Direction and purpose were needed. It was at that critical moment that the expectation of a future leader began to form within the heart of the Ummah. A man guided by God who appears at the end of times to restore what the world has corrupted. That man would be known as Al-Mahdi, the guided by God. The figure of the Mahdi does not replace the Prophet Muhammad. He does not bring a new revelation. He does not found a new religion. To understand the Islamic hope for the arrival of the Mahdi, we must look at the two main branches of Islam, Sunni and Shia. Both await a final leader, but they describe him in different ways. In the Sunni view, the Mahdi is a man who has not yet appeared. He will be a descendant of the Prophet Muhammad and will emerge during a time of moral chaos and global confusion. He will not come proclaiming himself ruler. He will be recognized for his humility, his justice, and the prophetic signs that will accompany him. Sunnis believe that he will restore the original faith, unite Muslims, and rule with righteousness, leading Islam to its final stage of purity and authority on earth. On the other hand, Twelver Shiites believe that the Mahdi has already been born. According to their tradition, it was Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Askari, the 12th Imam, born around 869 after Christ. According to this belief, God miraculously hid him, and he continues to live to this day, waiting for the appointed time to manifest himself. When he appears, he will not be recognized by human signs, but will reveal himself with divine authority to govern and purify the faith, imposing absolute justice on the earth. Despite their differences, both currents agree on a spiritual truth that sustains Islam. History will not end until the Mahdi appears and rules the world with divine justice. For Muslims, its arrival is inevitable. It is the climax of history, the final triumph of Islam over all nations. Now, to understand who the Mahdi is within Islamic thought, we must examine the attributes that traditional theology ascribes to him. The Mahdi is not just any leader, nor a temporary reformer. In classical doctrine, he possesses a unique profile that combines lineage, spiritual authority, political power, and eschatological mission. First, the Mahdi as an instrument of divine justice. The Mahdi is not presented in Islamic tradition as a conventional political leader, nor as a temporary social reformer. He is conceived as the enforcer of Allah's justice on earth, an agent chosen to intervene in humanity's darkest hour, when moral corruption, political oppression, and religious deception reach their peak. According to the Hadiths, his appearance coincided with an era of global turmoil, extreme injustice, and civilizational disorder. In this context, the Mahdi emerged not to negotiate, but to purify, restore, and establish divine order. His leadership does not depend on human speeches, revolutionary movements, or diplomatic mechanisms. His authority comes directly from heaven. Islamic narratives state, "He will fill the earth with justice and equity, just as it was previously filled with tyranny and oppression." This mission is not merely administrative or diplomatic, it is theocratic. The Mahdi imposes justice according to the parameters of Sharia, destroys unjust governments, and subjects nations to the rule of Islam, not by human force, but under the supposed divine mandate. The scholar Muhammad al-Barzanji writes, "He will judge by the law of Muhammad, and no one will be able to oppose his command." This perspective positions the Mahdi as a spiritual military figure whose role transcends the political to become an act of sacred execution. He does not simply rule, he corrects, judges, and restores divine will to the world. Each of his decrees is interpreted as Allah's judgment upon humanity. In this sense, the Mahdi presents himself as an eschatological purifier, one who destroys corrupt systems. It dismantles human ideologies, subdues earthly powers, and restores what is considered the true worship of God. Secondly, restorer of the original faith. Within Islamic eschatology, the Mahdi is seen as the great spiritual restorer, the one who returns humanity, and especially the Muslim world, to the purity of early Islam. Tradition teaches that over the centuries, faith will become contaminated. Doctrinal innovations, corrupt practices, unjust leaders, and a progressive distancing from the example of Muhammad and the life of his first followers will emerge. In the face of this deterioration, the Mahdi appears as the final renewer, Mujaddid, charged with cleansing the religion of all deviation and reinstating the pure doctrine as it was established in the original community of Medina. Its mission is to purify the faith, correct adulterated beliefs, and restore full observance of Sharia, not as a human system, but as the authentic divine order. Islamic narratives state, the Mahdi will act in accordance with the guidance of the Prophet and will not introduce any innovation. His task, therefore, is not to reform Islam, but to restore it. He does not create a new spiritual movement, but rekindles the flame of the original faith. He does not adapt the religion to modern times, but adapts the world to the eternal truth of Islam. For Muslims, this restoration means a return to absolute obedience, total religious rule, and the ideal community that, according to tradition, Muhammad established in his early years of leadership. In the Islamic vision, the Mahdi will be the ultimate agent of this return to purity, thus sealing the perfection of the message before the final judgment. Third, the ruler at the very end of times. The Mahdi is not presented solely as a teacher, spiritual guide, or religious reformer. Within the Islamic eschatological vision, he is also a universal ruler, destined to exercise political and spiritual authority over humanity in the final stretch of history. His government arises at the moment when the earth has reached its climax of corruption, injustice, and disorder, when human political, economic, and moral structures have demonstrated their absolute inability to sustain justice and truth. According to Islamic tradition, the Mahdi will rule with perfect and incorruptible justice, reflecting the decrees of Allah in every sphere of life. He will not be a leader subject to human constitutions, national interests, or international structures. His authority will be seen as a divine mandate, and his implementation of Islamic law will be universal. Classical texts state, "The Mahdi will rule the earth with justice and will fill the world with equity as it was previously filled with injustice and oppression." This reign is characterized by a global peace imposed from the supreme religious authority, where all forms of human tyranny will be defeated and political structures will be subjected to the Islamic order. In this context, the Mahdi does not only adjudicate legal cases, he orders nations, corrects systems, and establishes a theocratic government where religious authority and civil authority merge into a single will, the will of Allah. For millions of Muslims, his reign represents the culmination of history, the moment when the earth returns to total obedience to the Creator. And where humanity experiences an era of apparent prosperity, peace, and justice, albeit strictly under the supremacy of Islam and the universal practice of its laws. Fourth, manifestation of the final triumph of Islam. In the Islamic worldview, history culminates in the spiritual victory of Islam over the nations. The Mahdi embodies that triumph. He represents the final consolidation of Allah's dominion on earth. His figure symbolizes the fulfillment of the mission begun by Muhammad, universal submission to God, and the definitive establishment of Islamic truth. Therefore, his role is not to found a new religion. He does not introduce a new doctrine, nor does he modify revelation. The Mahdi brings to completion what Muhammad began, culminating the spiritual project of Islam according to tradition. The most important Muslim historians and theologians recognized that this belief is not marginal. It is a profound element of Islamic thought. The historian Ibn Khaldun stated, "Belief in the Mahdi took root in the hearts of all Muslims throughout time." The theologian Al-Qurtubi added, "The appearance of the Mahdi is an established truth. He will be from the family of the Messenger, and he will fill the earth with justice." With these statements, the Mahdi came to be considered an eschatological certainty within classical Islam, an inevitable figure at the end of history, whose arrival completes the spiritual cycle begun in the 7th century. Fifth, world government and spiritual domination. In Islamic eschatology, the Mahdi is not the leader of a nation, He is the leader of the world. The Hadith states, he will rule the earth for 7 years, filling it with equity and justice. Under his rule, the Islamic faith will triumph globally. The mission initiated by Muhammad will find universal fulfillment. Classical scholars summarize it thus: through the Mahdi, Islam will achieve its final dominion over all lands. Now, as we move forward in constructing the eschatological portrait of the Mahdi, we now enter the most sensitive and, for many, the most alarming phase, the description of his final actions according to Islamic sources. These are not mere religious symbols. We are dealing with a prophetic agenda that millions take literally, as future and sacred. This vision is not hidden in forgotten books, nor in fringe interpretations. It is preserved in traditional narratives, in theological commentaries, in the voices of jurists and teachers of classical Islam. And by examining it, we discover a sequence that shaped, shapes, and will continue to shape the Muslim historical vision of the end times. First, the sign of the black flags. The arrival of the Mahdi, traditions say, will not be silent. It will be marked by a military and spiritual movement. An army will emerge from the east, from the historic region of Khorasan, corresponding today to parts of Iran, Afghanistan, and northern Pakistan. A hadith cited by Al-Hakim and other classical compendiums states, "Black banners will come from Khorasan. No force will be able to stop them until they are planted in Jerusalem." These black flags bear the inscription of the Shahada, the Islamic confession, "There is no God but Allah and Muhammad is his messenger." Historically, they were symbols of conquest. Spiritually, they represent the final jihad. For scholars of Islam, this army does not symbolize peace. It symbolizes military victory, judgment, and global subjugation under the Islamic faith. Secondly, the advance towards Jerusalem. According to tradition, the Mahdi will unite this army and lead it towards the heart of the world's spiritual dispute, Jerusalem. For eschatological Islam, the city is not a symbol. It is the final destination of the Mahdi's religious and political authority. According to traditional sources, Jerusalem will be conquered, the Temple Mount will be taken, and black flags will be placed at Beit al-Maqdis, the present-day Temple Mount. Third, global prosperity under his rule. Once established, the Mahdi will not only reign as a conqueror, he will be presented as the restorer of justice, prosperity, and abundance. Traditions say that he will control the weather, rain, and harvests, and that wealth will flow without limit. Sunan al-Tirmidhi states, "The land will produce its treasures, riches will be abundant, and its rule will be beloved." In the Islamic vision, his reign will usher in an economic golden age. There will be no poverty, no misery, no economic injustice. People will speak of him constantly. They will draw hope from his name and his person. Fourth, a treaty with Rome and world domination. A unique tradition connects the emergence of the Mahdi with a pact with Rome. In Islamic literature, this term refers to the Western Christian powers. A hadith says, "There will be a truce between you and Rome. Then they will break the truce, and you will fight against them." According to the majority doctrine, the Mahdi will rule for 7 years, although other texts extend his rule to 9 or more, until he completes his universal mission. He will establish the Sunnah, divide the property equitably, reign for 7 years, and then die. In other words, his rule does not last forever. It serves a final purpose. Fifth, the Islamic interpretation of the rider on the white horse. Some Muslim scholars, seeking legitimacy in the Bible, claim that the figure of the Mahdi is foreshadowed in the Christian book of Revelation. They cite the passage, Revelation chapter 6 verse 2, where it says, "And I looked, and behold a white horse, and he that sat on it had a bow, and a crown was given unto him, and he went out conquering, and to conquer." They claim that this rider is the Mahdi. According to them, the Bible has been altered, but fragments reveal its truth. This claim does not come from Christian sources, but from Muslim authors who recognize the Mahdi as a messianic conqueror. Sixth, the Mahdi as the discoverer of the Ark and of hidden writings. Another surprising tradition holds that the Mahdi will find the Ark of the Covenant. According to the accounts, he will bring him out of his hidden place under the Sea of Galilee, and take him to Jerusalem as the final proof of his spiritual legitimacy. Furthermore, he is said to reveal original texts of the Torah and the Injil, Gospel, claiming that the Bible has been corrupted and that he will restore the true revelation. These ideas appear in classical sources such as Al-Suyuti and in narratives attributed to the Prophet of Islam. So far, we have seen the Islamic eschatological program, a final leader who will emerge from the lineage of the Prophet, supported by an army from the east, will march to Jerusalem, establish justice according to Sharia, and be recognized as world ruler. But Islamic eschatology doesn't end there. At that point, an even more striking figure enters the scene. A figure who, for 2 billion Christians, represents the hope of salvation, grace, and redemption. However, in Islamic narrative, he appears with a completely different role. According to Islam, when the Mahdi has consolidated his authority, when Jerusalem has become the universal spiritual center, and when the Islamic order is ready to expand unopposed, then Jesus will descend from heaven, but he will not be the Jesus of the gospel, not the Jesus who died and rose again for the sin of the world, not the king who will reign again from the throne of David. For Islam, Isa arrives not as a redeemer, but as a collaborator of the Mahdi, subject to his leadership and in charge of completing the final Islamic mission. Islamic texts declare, Jesus, son of Mary, will descend near the white minaret east of Damascus with his hands on the wings of 2 angels. When the leader of the Muslims, the Mahdi, sees him, he will step back to give him his place in prayer. But Jesus will place his hand on his shoulder and say, "Go ahead, for the direction of this prayer has been established for you." Then Jesus will pray behind him. That gesture is not symbolic. It signifies subordination. It signifies that, according to their eschatology, the ultimate authority is not Jesus Christ. It is the Mahdi. Islamic tradition describes the role of Jesus with 3 central actions. First, break the cross. This act, mentioned in Islamic hadiths, symbolizes a total rejection of the Christian faith, and in particular of the central message of the gospel, the cross of Christ as a means of redemption. According to Islamic tradition, when Jesus, whom they call Isa, returns, he will break the cross to declare that he was never crucified and that Christians were wrong to worship him as the Son of God. In other words, it is a gesture of denial of Christ's redemptive sacrifice, of which the cross is the supreme emblem in Christianity. For Muslims, this act represents the purification of monotheism according to their interpretation. But from a Christian perspective, it is a direct offense against the gospel of grace. Second, eliminate the pig. In Islamic symbolism, the pig represents that which is impure and forbidden. However, in the prophetic context of the hadiths, eliminating the pig is not limited to a dietary practice. Rather, it expresses the intention to eradicate all traces of Western Christian culture, since the consumption of pork and its cultural presence is one of the most visible features of the non-Muslim world. In other words, this action represents the destruction of Christian and Western values, customs, and symbols that, according to that view, oppose the complete establishment of Islam. Third, abolish the jizya. The jizya is a tax that historically Christians and Jews living under Islamic rule had to pay as a sign of submission and conditional tolerance. The prophecy says that in the era of the Mahdi and the Islamic Jesus, the jizya will be abolished because, according to its interpretation, there will no longer be any Christians or Jews under covenant, as all of humanity will accept Islam as the only religion. In other words, there will be no room for religious diversity, but rather a global unification under the Islamic faith. The Hadith declares, he will descend as a just judge, break the cross, eliminate the pig, and abolish the jizya. He doesn't come preaching love, grace, or forgiveness. In that narrative, he comes to validate the absolute supremacy of Islam and to eliminate all spiritual resistance. However, to understand the spiritual force behind the figure of the Mahdi, it is not enough to study ancient texts. It is necessary to look at the real world. Today, entire nations act under the conviction that this final leader will appear. For them, he is not a myth. He is the future. He is purpose. He is destiny. While the West treats faith as a cultural custom, in much of the Islamic world, the Mahdi's prophecy is agenda, planning, and politics. Governments, militaries, and national visions are shaped by this expectation. Iran, the center of Shia Islam, openly declares that its mission is to prepare for the arrival of the Mahdi. Its constitution mentions him, and its Revolutionary Guard defines itself as the army of the awaited Imam. Their missiles, speeches, and alliances are guided by that faith. Their enmity with Israel is not just strategy, it is prophetic doctrine. For them, Jerusalem must become the throne of the Mahdi. Turkey is reviving the dream of the old Ottoman Caliphate. Under strong leadership and with an expanding religious base, it seeks to regain spiritual and political influence in the Islamic world. For millions of Muslims, Turkey represents the hope for unified leadership when the Mahdi appears. Their gaze is also fixed on Jerusalem. Saudi Arabia, the birthplace of Islam and guardian of Mecca and Medina, lives between modernization and tradition. But beneath the surface, its religious structure maintains the conviction that Jerusalem is part of Islam's spiritual destiny. Although it opens its doors to the world, it never renounces the prophetic idea that the Mahdi must reign from the Holy Land. Therefore, while the West sees diplomacy, they see preparation. They build alliances, strengthen armies, and orient their economy and religion toward a prophetic end. They don't wait in silence. They prepare. In the Middle East, every movement, every speech, and every conflict carries an echo. The Mahdi is coming. Dear listener, in this documentary, we have explored a spiritual expectation that moves nations, armies, ideologies, and hearts. The arrival of the Mahdi, the final leader awaited by millions within Islam. They believe that he will come to rule from Jerusalem, that a false Jesus will back him up, that he will impose his authority over the nations, and that every knee must submit to his word. But the Bible revealed, centuries earlier, that a world leader would rise up, deceiving the nations, proclaiming peace and unity, and establishing his earthly throne. And the Bible calls him by another name, the man of sin, the son of perdition, the Antichrist, who will possibly deceive Muslims as their expected Messiah, the Mahdi, and also Jews as the Messiah they await. This will fulfill what Daniel says in chapter 9, verse 27. For 1 week, that ruler will make a covenant with many. The ruler who will sign this pact is the Antichrist. This agreement will encompass many nations, but primarily Israel and the Muslim world. After this pact, it is possible that Muslims will cede the Temple Mount, where their mosques are located today, the third holiest site in their faith, from where, according to their belief, Muhammad ascended to heaven, so that Jews can build their temple there. However, this will be the greatest deception, for the same passage from Daniel continues. But in the middle of the week, he will put an end to sacrifices and offerings, and in the temple he will set up the abomination that causes destruction, until the disastrous end that has been decreed for it comes to pass. The Antichrist, after signing that peace pact, will break it 3.5 years later, bringing pain and affliction to the world. And what the Apostle Paul wrote will be fulfilled. He opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. However, dear listener, this story does not end with the rise of the impostor, but with the glorious appearance of the true King of the universe. Not the one who comes behind another, nor the one who needs human help, but the one who comes with power, glory, and judgment, claiming what belongs to him from eternity. Scripture proclaims it with eternal authority in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 8. And then the lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord will overthrow with the breath of his mouth and destroy by the splendor of his coming. Christ himself will overcome it with his voice, with his light, with his glory. The book of Revelation chapter 1, verse 7 declares, "Look, he is coming with the clouds, and every eye will see him, even those who pierced him, and all the peoples of the earth will mourn because of him, so shall it be." Amen. He does not come hidden. He does not come gradually. He comes visibly. He comes gloriously. He comes as King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Therefore, Islam awaits an earthly leader. Biblical prophecy reveals the eternal King. Dear listener, this story is not meant to instill fear, but to awaken discernment. The world is preparing to crown a final leader, but the church is not waiting for a human government. It is waiting for the Lord of glory, Jesus Christ. And so we come to the end of this video. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for joining us until the end. I invite you to share this teaching so that more people may be edified and reflect on the Word of God. See you in the next video, and may the peace of the Lord be with you and your family, today and always. May God bless you abundantly.